Let's get to House of Delegates member Rob Bell. He's joining us by phone. He's back in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I'm live at the DNC in Philadelphia. He's having a bagel. I'm having a Philly cheesesteak in a couple minutes, which I've had. This will be Philly cheesesteak number 3 for me since I've been here. Got to eat those, especially for breakfast. And Rob Bell, also a candidate for Attorney General and the architect of the lawsuit on the restoration of rights that went up in flames the other day. Terry McAulliffe rebuked by the Supreme Court of Virginia 4-3. Delegate Bell, Rob, good to have you with us, man.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. And I guess if that's your third for the day or just the third for the trip?
I'm not that overweight. No, it's the third Philly cheesesteak of the trip. My wife said you cannot eat one every day, but you're in Philadelphia, so you can have one every other day. So I've been here 6 days, and this will be number 3. I've been here since Saturday, however many days that is. So
we expect you to run up those steps like Rocky to make up for it?
I gotta, yeah. Well, the thing is, I've actually, even though I've eaten this much, Rob, and of course, as thin as you are, right, you don't really understand this. But those of us that are a little rotund in the waist, the walking I've done in both Cleveland and Philadelphia to get from your car or wherever you are through the security into the media center is a long walk. So I have gotten a little extra. So as much as I've eaten, I've actually lost weight. So I'm feeling good.
Well, good.
Not Rob Bell lost weight, right? I don't have the Rob Bell belt physique, but I'm working on it.
Well, all you got to do is run for office, man. Because, you forget meals, you run around a lot. So,
well, nobody works harder than Rob Bell. I've said that 100 times. You're everywhere. You're unbelievable. Let's get to Friday's Supreme Court decision knocking down Terry McAuliffe's, I guess now unconstitutional restoration of rights. I want you to detail that, and then also I want you to comment. I had the governor on my show yesterday, I believe, or Tuesday, Monday. I don't remember. I think Monday.
Sure.
I asked him about it, and he said, okay, whatever. I'm just going to sign 200,000 of them. And I'm like, okay, well, that's what you should have done in the first place because that's the rules. But what went down here?
All right. So, I mean, this was a landmark case, and Republicans have been watching Washington for the last 7 years and watched people, the president sign unconstitutional executive orders, and they come on your show and say, why doesn't somebody do something about it? And this was our chance to do something about it. So what happened was back on April 22nd, as you said, the governor signed an executive order restoring the political rights to 206,000 felons. And every governor prior to him had restored some rights one by one, and even Governor McAuliffe had restored 18,000 felons one by one, just like the Constitution requires. But for whatever reason, and I'm sure he told you what his reason was, that wasn't fast enough, and he said, I'm going to do them all at once, don't care how violent the crime is, and you're going to look at what the crime was, we're going to do them all. And it's just not constitutional. That's not what the Constitution allows. The Constitution says that felons can't vote or sit on juries, they lose their political rights, and the governor can restore them one by one, but he can't do it all at once. And so here you have it. You have an unconstitutional executive order, and we sort of looked around, and was somebody going to challenge this? And it was pretty clear that if we didn't do it, nobody would. And so the General Assembly Republicans got together. We hired a really good lawyer. We had to find some petitioners, some actual plaintiffs, and I've told this story many times, but that was one of my tasks. And so we literally we're going to meetings and asking for a show of hands. I said, is anybody upset about the Constitution, being contradicted by the governor? A bunch of hands go up. Does anybody want to be in a lawsuit about it? A bunch of hands go down, but we finally found some people, and one of them was Mary Ann Gearhart. She was at a meeting in Northern Virginia that I visited, and I talked to her after the meeting. I said, are you serious? She said yes, and there she was. She was on the lawsuit. So the case went on, and as the sort of the weeks went by, we got better and better news. The first was that the Supreme Court agreed to hear it, and that was sort of a risky decision we made. We said we probably could go through the lower court, but then it would take a long time before we got a final resolution. So we went directly to the Supreme Court, and then the Supreme Court agreed to speed it up. They decided to hear it in July, which was the first time in the 90s they'd had a special session for something like that. And then we started investigating the governor's list, and he had a list of 206,000 felons, and he refused to release it, but he set up a website so that you could look yourself up.
Really?
And we had prosecutors start to look up some high-profile cases because the governor promised the only people that would be on the list would be people that were out of prison and had finished probation. But it was Jim Fisher up in Fauquier. He's the prosecutor in Fauquier. He just decided to put in some high-profile cases that were still in prison. And Shazam, he was the one who found the first one, and it was a gentleman, Mr. Storm is his name. He's serving a life sentence right now, but he was on the governor's list. And at that point, we said, oh, my gosh, it sounds like the list is a mess. And then we just started trying, people putting in different names with information. And
right.
It turns out you had people serving prison sentences. You have people on probation in other states. You have fugitives. We had a guy, he was in Peru. He had committed his crime, served his sentence, been deported because he's a non-citizen. But there he was on the list to become a juror and a voter. There's a sex offender rehab facility where it's a lockdown facility and not away. 132 people with the same address, most serious sex crimes we have. They were all on the list to have their rights restored. So this was sort of the backdrop as we rolled into Tuesday. And on Tuesday they had the hearing, and it was very exciting. Sometimes when your lawyer's speaking, you feel like you're sure to win, that everything he says is amazing. This was the opposite. The court was very, very rigorous in their questioning. So when our guy got done, it sounded pretty bad. I mean, the justice had been real hard on him. And then Mark Herring's guy stood up and started talking, and they were even harder on him. So we felt a little better after that. But we knew it would be close just from listening to the questions. And it ultimately came down 4-3, and the court on Friday ruled in our favor on every point. And they said the governor had simply acted unconstitutionally, and there's some pretty ringing language, but they said that the governor is allowed to champion whatever he wants, but he can't do it in contravention of the law. And they struck down his executive order as unconstitutional.
So that's it. I mean, it's just unconstitutional. And so you guys fought it. You guys won. I know, Rob Bell, that you personally put a lot into this and put a lot of your own political capital behind it. Let me ask you something. Remember the big fight over Judge Roush?
Mm-hmm.
If you guys hadn't stood firm, if the Republicans hadn't stood firm, and certainly Judge Roush was qualified, that was never the issue. If she was the judge in lieu of the judge that you put in there, I can't think of his name. Who was it?
McAuliffe was the one that finally was put
McAuliffe, right? Because I remember it was the African-American guy. He went down, and then you went to Cuccinelli, and I guess he didn't think $195,000 for life was enough money, so he went down. And then you went with, what's his name?
McCullough is the guy that we chose.
McCullough, okay. So if Roush was in there, would it have gone 4-3 the other way?
Well, of course, we will never know. And we do know that McCullough voted in favor of it. Now, what's important there was that was another unconstitutional act by the governor. And in both instances, when we kind of made the decision to fight, there were naysayers. In both times, people said, oh, my goodness, you'll look real bad. There'll be political consequences. People will call you names, all of which was true and all of which happened. But both times we thought the fight was worth making. And obviously we didn't know that this case was coming because no governor had ever tried something like this before. But we thought, Supreme Court appointment is forever. We really need the right one there, and so we made that fight. And then this fight, too. There were certainly people that said the lawsuit won't work, or you'll look bad, or there'll be political consequences. And we said it's the Constitution. It's worth fighting for.
Right. So you got to fight for something at the end of the day. At this point,
we've had two fights. The fights look a lot better when you win, but even at the beginning, you never know if you're going to win.
So when the governor came on my show, and, of course, he blasted the decision as you expected and said that I'm just going to get a stamp and I'm going to sign 200,000 of these. I'm going to sign, however many a day until they're done. That's within his rights, right? I mean, that's within the law.
Well, I mean, we'll see. We'll see what he does. The governor thought he could do what he could do the first time and got his advice from Mark Herring and just went and did it. The court was pretty sharp with him. And what they said was, you have the right to restore, felons' political rights one by one. That's clear from the Constitution. What you don't have the right to do is suspend a general rule. And the general rule is that felons can't vote. And so that's the dynamic the court set up. If he goes and does something that doesn't have some sort of individual review, we're going to look at it pretty closely to see if we think it's a constitutional violation. And if it's a constitutional violation, we'll take him to court. Mm-hmm. Now, even beyond that, so if he can figure out a way to abide by the Constitution, he has a problem with his list. The only list he has is the list that we were talking about. There's no secret list. This is the list that he was providing to the registrars. And by his own account, every couple of weeks, somebody finds something wrong with it. And he's not arguing that there's something wrong with it. He keeps saying, don't worry, we'll fix it. Don't worry, we'll fix it. But he hasn't fixed it yet, and there's no indication that he has the ability to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
The Washington Post, I mean, it's not just typos. There's a bunch of typos in it, and he's already acknowledged there's typos in it. But we keep finding whole categories of offenders that are in the list that shouldn't be. So the Washington Post found some fugitives. A fugitive is not in prison. They're not on probation. So by Terry McAuliffe's, original, sort of list that he put together, they're on the list. Well, a month later, so he says, don't worry, I'll fix it. I get it. I understand. There's two lists. We've got to use the fugitive list, too, and make sure this works. Well, a month later, the Richmond Times-Dispatch went through the sex offender registry, found 2 sex offenders that were listed as fugitives, plugged them into the website, and shazam, there they were on the list of people whose rights were to be restored. If the governor goes through and uses his list, and if the governor goes through and just starts signing names, those are the names he's going to sign, and he can't fix it then. There's nothing to fix. At that point, he's restored the right. So there's constitutional issues here, and then also just practical issues that he doesn't even have a list that he can work from.
So he doesn't even have a list. So then what happens?
I mean, he has a list. He has a list, but it's not a list that meets any even of his own rules. It's not even a list of people who are out of prison and off probation. It includes these people that shouldn't be there.
Unbelievable. So basically, he's just going to go through these one by one. If he does it one by one and looks at all of them, then he's fine.
If he goes one by one and looks at them, in other words, if he does an individualized review, that's what the Constitution requires. But smart people have done the math that even if the one by one is 60 seconds, he takes 1 minute to look at the person, look at his criminal record, think about it for 10 seconds. He's not going to get through 206,000.
Yeah, no way.
The way he would get through 206,000 is to not do anything. It's
right.
to put a big stack under the auto pen and start signing.
Right.
And then we'll have to review to see if that's enough individualized action for the court to be satisfied.
Or just hire some staff people to vet them under the instructions that he would do it. Like say, these are the things I'm looking for, and then trust his staff to be able to provide him for electronic signature.
Sure, but he hasn't even done that yet, and we've said this several times.
Right.
The list errors so far would have been caught by a high school intern.
Right.
And I mean, the best example is the sex offender rehab facility in Nottoway.
Right.
If some high school intern had been looking through it, he would have said, "Hey, boss, there's 132 people at the exact same address, and almost every one of them has some real serious offense like rape or forcible sodomy. I don't know what's going on. All I know is that this is something odd."
Right.
And they couldn't be bothered to get that right.
Exactly.
And even the typos. I mean, he just said, we messed up the Social Security number.
Yeah. I mean,
this is a fast food order or something.
I've said
here
this.
He was restoring rights, so it's
You're
a
right.
big deal.
I've said this before. I think the rights have to be restored. He went about it the wrong way. He politicized it. And then he was, he did it in a way that's, in violation of our Constitution. We're out of time, Rob, but one thing I want you to just have your staff email me is, McAuliffe had a constitutionalist who said it was constitutional. I mean, I don't see, it's kind of black and white, but I got to take off. Rob Bell is running for Attorney General. This is the John Fredericks Radio Network. I'll be right back.